Psychology in Seattle.
So, Umberto, have you seen The Boys on TV or whatever the streaming service is? Have you seen the TV show called The Boys?
I have.
Did you like it?
I did.
You've also read the comics, have you not?
I have.
You also, a while ago, thought you had bought the first issue of The Boys, thinking that
like
it would
in mint condition kind of thing,
Yeah,
framed and everything.
and it was going to be like a collector's item. But then you, after the TV show came out, you went and looked for it and found out that you in fact had not bought it.
That either I hadn't or I've somehow misplaced it.
And now it's like,
Well, it's gone up in value. It like probably at least doubled, maybe tripled by now.
so I thought we would talk about the psychology of The Boys in both the TV show and the comic book. What do you say?
I love it.
Comic.
The graphic novel, yes.
Oh, it's a graphic novel?
It's a graphic novel.
But wasn't it originally just like a comic?
So when comics are for man-childs, we call them graphic novels.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast for man-childs. I am your man-child, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor and a man-child. Who are you, Umberto?
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and so you know how sometimes people get tattoos that they don't like,
Yeah.
and then they go and have them removed?
Yeah.
Well, I do the same, but for T-shirts.
So let's talk about the psychology. So I have an outline here, and let's try to stick to, the topic, because I got a lot of different areas that I want to get into. First that I want to get into is Homelander,
Sweet.
the psychology of Homelander.
He was the standout in the show as far as I'm concerned.
Really?
Yeah, like as far as the actors and how close they got to him based on the comic and just the coolest scenes and things like that. I think Homelander takes the cake for me.
Yeah, the primary psychological thing that I can point to with regards to Homelander is that we find out in the TV show, and we'll just stick to the TV show, and if you want to drop in every
Sure.
once in a while the accuracy to the comics, do so. But I think 99% of the people who are going to listen to this are going to be TV.
Almost no one has read the graphic novel.
Yeah.
Like I went online on YouTube and stuff. I was trying to find comparisons and things because I have very strong opinions. And almost every review I found was like, so I didn't realize that there was a comic book until after I saw the movie, and so stuff like that. The one video I could find was actually pointing out like what things were better about the TV show than the comic book. So yeah, I'm aware that for the most part, no one has heard of the comic book.
So feel free to sprinkle it in every now and then, but let's stick to the TV show. So Homelander, the most important psychological thing that we can turn to is his massive attachment issues as a result of being raised in a lab with no parents, seemingly since he was born.
Yep.
He grows up in a lab, and just imagine that. And they show that pretty well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things about the show that I think is really great. And I think one of the things that's really great about new streaming TV shows is that back in the day, they had 35 episodes a year they had to fill.
Yeah.
And they really took their time. And so there's pros and cons to that. But I have so many shows I want to watch. I only have so much time. And so The Boys is 8 episodes. It's like 8 hours. It's like maybe a 9-10 hour movie or something.
Right.
Oh, for those who you don't know, The Boys is it was a comic back in the 90s or something.
No. It was 2006.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost.
It was post 9/11, and that was very relevant to the story.
Okay. And it was by a British comic book
Garth
artist.
Ennis.
And the comic is definitely for adults.
Oh, yeah.
Got a lot of X-rated, R-rated stuff in
Like
it.
adults.
Yeah. And the look of it is kind of like R. Crumb oriented in the beginning anyway. It had a very 70s, not your quintessential comic book look to it.
Yeah, they're not. If they're not polished looking people, it's kind of grimy in a way.
But very artistic. I mean, each frame, I
Yeah.
looked at some of the original artwork, and it was
Yeah.
just really great.
Yeah.
And essentially what the whole story is, because some people listen to our episodes and they haven't consumed the thing we're talking
Right.
about. So it's an 8 episode thing on Amazon Prime that is a world in which they have superheroes who live amongst us in the way that you've seen but it's completely different from any other superhero product that we've seen recently. I mean, I guess you could say it'd be kind of like the what was the Wolverine movie called?
Oh yeah, Old Man Logan.
Yeah.
Whatever.
What was that movie called?
Logan.
Logan, right.
Yeah.
In that the superheroes are real human beings. They're not these one-dimensional, all-good, simplistic characters. In fact, they're enormously human, and they have insecurities, and they might sexually harass people at work.
Yeah.
They might have sex lives.
And they're not aliens or robots or magical creatures. They are humans.
Right.
Yeah.
And they are insecure, and they want to be famous, and they worry about movie contracts, and they worry about their image, and they have corporations that take care of them, and advertisers and agents and people who handle their Twitter accounts. And
fans. People that hate them.
And spin, and they're involved in politics, and their power grabs, and there's just all this kind of stuff. And so in this world, the main superheroes anyway, if not all of them, are essentially contracted to this one organization called Vought, which is like, think of it as like the Apple of superheroes.
Yeah.
They're the best. They have all the best people. They know how to, or think of it as like the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah.
If, you think about all the marketing that goes in, all the advertising, the product placement, the spin, everything, and movie deals and everything, except it's in the real world.
And we should point out that most of the heroes, like probably 99% of them, have kind of basic superpowers, and they're only a little more powerful than a normal human. It varies, but then there's a very small subset of them that are ridiculously overpowered.
Right.
And they're kind of their main ones.
Right. So with Homelander, and as the season progresses, we start learning more and more about the backstory of these individuals. And what we learn is that the way that, and I guess we're going to spoil the entire
Spoiler
show.
alert. We got to spoil some stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And spoiler alert for the comic, because I'll have to mention some things.
Yeah. So what we learn in the beginning or later on in the season of the 8 episodes is that because it's believed and it's spun that the superheroes are born that way.
Right. It's like from God or something.
Yeah.
It's divine intervention. Yeah.
We don't. That was another thing I sort of liked was the economy of the backstory. They didn't go into a lot. They just gave just enough. But the impression was that, people can, because that's how Vought, the organization, spun it, was that Homelander, for example, grew up an all-American boy.
Right.
The Superman story.
It is, except that he didn't arrive in an aircraft or in a spacecraft. Other than that, it's the Superman story.
Right.
And in fact, the main 7, as they call them, they're very much a Justice League kind of situation. They have their Superman, their Batman, their Wonder Woman, their Aquaman.
Oh, I didn't realize
Flash.
that one guy sort of like their Batman.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that. Right. They have a Wonder Woman, a Flash, a Superman, an Aquaman, and Justice League never had an Invisible Man.
Not that I remember. I mean, do you remember the extended universe Justice League that had like the Growing Man, and they had the Hawkeye or Hawkman?
That's not extended. That's canon.
Sure, but I
that
mean,
was
like
the cartoon when the 70s.
Yeah, but I'm saying like there was the core group of them, and then mostly it included and you might include the Wonder Twins if you're feeling lucky that day. But anyways, yeah, this one it just has 7. And I guess one of them was an invisible one, yes.
Yeah, so we learned that Homelander was not, in fact, raised in an all-American farmhouse and played baseball and his mom made pie, but that he was actually snatched from his parents, whom we never learn about. Maybe he was an orphan, or we just don't know. But he was raised in a lab, very cold lab, and given this compound V substance to inspire and the idea is that when you give it to humans, this substance that we don't know where it came from, that it is random in terms of what sort of superpowers exist, and it also can kill people. Bad things can happen. Like you could maybe, by implication, they're saying like with this compound V stuff, you could get the superpower to blow yourself up.
Right. Who knows how many babies died in the process, right?
Right. So he's raised in a lab, no parents, and we have real life examples of this. I've treated people like this, not exactly, but the attachment situation is the same in that the individual is raised in a institution, or they're even in a bubble because of risk of infection because of a medical condition that they have. Mm-hmm. And so by function, they don't have a consistent caregiver like you would find in a home 0 to 12 months,
right,
where it's 1 or 2 people, maybe 3 or 4, but definitely one person who is there a lot, holding, noticing, feeding, cleaning, changing diapers, sleeping next to, waking up, putting to bed, waking up, playing with toys, face-to-face contact. One particular person becomes particularly important as we go into month 5, 6, 7. That's when we, as humans, we really start to lock into particular individuals.
And like the touch too, right? Like just even just being held and
right.
Yeah.
Right. So some babies grow up in incubators. I don't know the exact ICU kind of situations. Actually, they call it NICU. And there's not. And now we know at 2019 we know you got to take that baby out, you got to hold it,
right,
even if it does risk some level of infection. They need some physical human touch, and so Homelander doesn't get any of that.
In fact, they have that one scene where he's I forget how, but he's still very, very little, and he's sitting there on the ground looking up and through a window, and the main scientist is kind of making little peekaboo things at him, but through a big padded door and a thing, and it's like it's less than you would with an animal,
Right. Yeah, they very, very economically showed in probably 30 seconds what must have been Homelander's childhood. So when we have kids like this that grow up like this, there's some universal reactions. One is that difficulty regulating your emotions, difficulty even knowing who you are, difficulty managing trust in relationships, not necessarily having connection to the part of you that really cares about connecting with other human beings.
Yeah.
It's not that you don't have empathy. It's not like you're a psychopath, but long ago, like month 8, month 9, if you think when you look back at when you were 12, that time seemed to go really slowly, well, ratchet that back to when you were 8 months old.
Oh, yeah.
Every hour was an eternity. And every hour of you being neglected and alone was an eternity of time to think about, why is it that I am not getting what I really want, which is that one person to hold me and hug me and be with me all the time? Why is that not happening? And the conclusions that you make subconsciously are, there's something wrong with me, and or there's something wrong with other people, and or there is really no love in the world. There's not a thing called love. There's not a thing called attachment. This is all subconscious, and I'm sort of simplifying it. But I've worked with attachment injured people before and their families, and one of the things that you'll hear that the parents will say is that their relationship with the kids will be very distressing because the parents will be trying to get some kind of connection with the kid.
Yeah.
And the kid will have glimpses of connection to the parents, but there will be very frequent moments where the parents are like, I feel like this kid could live anywhere and be the same. They could live next door, they could live with my grandparents, they could live with another foster home, they could live with me, and it's like there's no difference to them.
Like they're not having they feel they're not even having an effect one way or another.
Right. Like the kid considers them the way that if you had a boarder move into your house or an Airbnb person and it's a 35-year-old traveling salesman, they're nice.
Yeah.
And they might be respectful, but, they could take you or leave you. It's like you're just like your chopped liver.
Or a cat.
Yeah. And there you are as a parent just pouring your love. And maybe you even adopted this kid when the kid was 2, 3, or 4, but the damage is already done. And so you're trying to connect, and your whole life you're just never really connecting with that kid. And parents end up beating themselves up or thinking that the kid has something wrong with them, mentally ill or something, or that they just need to try harder. And the fact is that that window might have passed. Now, it doesn't mean that the kid can't love, doesn't mean the kid can't find some way of connecting, because they do, but it's usually often at an impairment kind of. It's always at least slightly impaired. So Homelander exhibits this in that. Well, how do you think he exhibits this in this show?
Oh, and by the way, that part of it is the same in the comic books, as that they grab these babies and they do these things. And so you see the same kind of behaviors in the comic book for Homelander. I would call it, that sort of psychopathic kind of tendency of he will be as superficially glib and charming as possible in the right circumstances. But as soon as the camera is off or someone's not looking, his demeanor changes in a sub-second to this kind of like, why am I even being bothered with this kind of thing? And he doesn't seem to really understand. Like, he actually is obviously very smart, so he gets the gravity of a situation, like when they're in the airplane, for example. But he has no feeling beyond that. It's not like, oh man, this is really such a tragedy. It's more like, well, we gotta go. It's just matter of fact. Like, but what about all the people? What am I supposed to do? Well, I can't do anything.
Right.
Like,
because,
what do you want from me?
Right. That's that part of it that when he was very young, he had just a normal need for a connection, for love, for being held, for security. And repeatedly, second by second by second, it wasn't being met. And so the solution neuronally is for the brain to turn off a certain, the way to look at brain development is, one of the ways to look at brain development is that we're born with a lot of connections. And as we develop through our early years, we pare down to the connections that are used, which are the ones that are important. It's why one of the hypotheses around language is that we're born with the ability to say all vocalizations. Like we're born with the ability to speak Chinese, as
mechanically.
Mechanically, we can say the syllables and we can say all the syllables around the planet, and it's all jumbled up and meaningless. And as we develop our accent and our local way of talking, we lose certain connections and ability to hear and actually articulate certain kinds of vocalizations because we're not using them.
So what's your hypothesis then why I retained kitty speak as an ability?
Oh God, don't even go into that. I was listening back to the 11th and I had to turn it off. I'm no joke. Like, save that for very limit.
Do you know that I posted 3 kitty?
And I don't want to talk about it. So let's just move on.
I have a fan base.
I know. And I'm grateful for that connection with
That's hilarious.
Some sort of weird listener, but that will not happen right now. If you had Compound V, that would be we'll talk about that. Anyway, so one way of looking at Homelander and people like him is that we are born with the neurons to facilitate connection with other people, notice other people's feelings, to be sensitive to other people, to mentalize what's going on in that person's mind, to care about other human beings, to care about their well-being, to feel in our souls, in our body, the emotions that other people go through. That's what cringing is. When we're watching Curb Your Enthusiasm and we're cringing, it's because we are feeling a feeling that the character is feeling. and it's not just an emotional thing, but it's a bodily, which
Right.
is it is emotions. We're cringing, or when you're watching a horror movie and someone's getting hurt and you sort of wince and you might even feel the pain in your body or you start sweating. These are our ability to mentalize, our ability to empathize what's going on, and it's not just an intellectual thing; it's a
Right.
physical thing.
It's not just you're watching Curb Your Enthusiasm as an example, and you go, "Oh, I should cringe right now."
Right.
It's actually the other way around. You start cringing, and then you're like, oh, "I'm cringing."
Right.
You realize it after the fact, as opposed to someone that's very skilled that did develop other skills, like in the case of the Homelander. Clearly, he is a master actor / manipulator because he can be like, okay, right now I need to appear as if I'm very emotional about where I grew up, and then my mom, and then my little league practice, and he does a great job, but he's feeling none of it, right? He's just telling himself, okay, now I should probably try to cry a little bit,
Right, and just and I agree that the performance in that character in the TV show is amazing. That character is on the show acting like Homelander, acting like he grew up on a farm.
Yeah, it's great.
And the on a dime, like he's like, "Are we rolling? Are we rolling?" And they're like, "Okay, we're rolling." And he put on the smile.
Yeah.
And anyway, so he did. One way of looking at his development and people like him is that all those neurons that are associated with our ability to empathize and care were pruned down as a result of them not really being used and needed when he was growing up. And therefore, when he exhibits behavior as an adult, it's not. So I want to be clear about Homelander is that he has psychopathic traits, but he's not like people are. One of the things that I think people are mistaking Homelander for is that he is like Charles Manson or some kind of psycho killer of some kind. And certainly he's been responsible for killing a lot of people.
And in the comic book, although I got to now be careful what I say because I don't know what they're going to do in the future. So I'm going to say this. In the comic book, there are clear examples, even in the very first graphic novel book, where it's actually worse than that, where you're like,
Right.
oh, it is a Dahmer, it is a Ted Bundy,
Right.
it is this kind of thing.
And I heard that, maybe you told me, and I like the fact that they didn't do that because the Homelander character, I would lose all interest in that character if he was a Dahmer or a Ted Bundy character, to me. Now, I'm guessing in the graphic novel, it would make it interesting.
Yeah, I that's what I'll say. I'll say I totally understand what you're saying and totally agree. They decided, probably because they might have not even known they were going to have more seasons or whatever, they definitely decided to change some key parts of the story. And I'm very curious if they're going to try to reintegrate some of it. But what I'll say is that there are aspects that make it totally enjoyable in its own way in the graphic novel that you see these scenes of craziness. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my impression is the graphic novels are quite long and extensive.
Yeah,
and
there's 12 books. you know.
Like, so...
Yet, one thing they have done in this show is even in season 1, they kind of pulled in storylines that went well into, like, it wasn't just like the first book. They actually pulled into stuff, and then they ignored whole swaths of other stuff, which of course you kind of have to do. Later I'll get to, there's one main thing that is really actually bugging me about what they did, but it has nothing to do with Homelander.
Yeah. We'll get into our likes and dislikes. So we see that Homelander is desperate for Elizabeth Shue's love, and it's connected also to, so he's a grown man now, so it's not just that he wants her love as a mother, but he also wants her love as a wife or a sexual partner. And it's depicted in the show, again, the economy of the scenes and the writing is so great because they only have... Homelander arguably is a very secondary character to Huey and Butcher and even Elizabeth Shue, and yet they manage to show, episode to episode, this progression from Homelander being you just sense the pent up tension in his body of just like, I want to be close to Elizabeth Shue. She is, milking her. She's what do they call pumping?
Pumping.
She's pumping, and she has a baby now, and I want to be that baby. And at the beginning, you don't really get a sense for that, but as the season goes on, you're just like, oh, I think because at first you're like, oh, he's just really obsessed with her, and then I was like, oh no, he wants to be her baby.
He's jealous of the baby.
Right. He comes across like a impertinent older brother to the new baby.
Yeah.
And the way that they intertwined his ultimate power and adult side of himself with his very infantile, very childish, very boyish, desperate behavior. And so, and seen through those eyes, it explains everything. So,
Right.
for example, when he decides to blow up the mayor's or the politician from Baltimore, I think it was a mayor,
Yeah, it's the mayor.
the airplane.
Right.
You could imagine, say, a 4-year-old kid, if he had the power, would jealously decide to do something like that if someone was threatening their mother and they wanted to be a good boy. I'm trying to be a good boy for mommy, and I want her to love me in comparison to my little brother. So I got to really make a splash here.
Right.
And so, okay, that man was threatening my mom, or at least I'm perceiving that. And so I want to be a good boy. So I'm going to slash his tires because I saw that on a TV show. Like you could see a 4-year-old maybe not pulling it off all the way, but you could see them having an impulse.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And so you put ultimate power into this 4-year-old. That's the other way of looking at Homelander, is that he's arrested development, which is a way of looking at a lot of people, is that if you're not properly parented at a certain age, a certain part of your personality is still of that mindset.
Right.
Where you're desperate for love, you don't really think things through, you're totally focused on that one person.
Yep.
You're not focused on other people, you're not focused on even your siblings, you're not focused on society, or you don't really care how you look. You're just focused on, I want mommy to love me, I want mommy to like me. And so in the beginning, you're like, oh boy, like Homelander is a psychopath. But as the season goes on, you're like, oh no, he's just he's a 4-year-old boy trying to get the love of his mom. Did you like that?
Yeah. So this part was not in the comic book. There was no Elizabeth Shue's character in the comic book the graphic novel. At least, again, I don't know what they're gonna do, but it starts with a guy. There's this one guy who's in charge of them. He's he's this very cold, calculating dude. There is a female that comes in later in the story, but there is no sort of relationship like that. So you don't see those aspects. I really thought that it was great. They did it really well, and like you're saying, yeah, I got the same sense. Like, yeah, this is this little kid who's been given Superman powers. I haven't seen Brightburn, but I'm imagining that movie Brightburn, isn't it called?
Brightburn?
Isn't it called Brightburn?
Or Bright?
No. Recent movie where it's like a kid like Superman, but he's got superpowers, like he's an alien with superpowers, but he's evil or something.
Haven't heard
Anyways, so yeah, I thought the same, and I liked that angle they took. One thing that I'll say too is that the scene in the airplane where they're trying to save this airplane, and they screw it up. Basically, they can't.
Yeah, I love that scene.
So, in the graphic novel, it's an even more important thing because it's 9/11. 9/11 is happening. These planes are headed, and then the Air Force has already blown up one of the planes.
So it's the Pennsylvania one or something?
It's actually the one going towards the towers.
Oh.
It's one going towards the towers. The Air Force has blown up one of the planes already, killed everyone on board. So it's tragic, but they're like, we can't risk whatever. And then they call in the 7 to see if they can stop the other one, save the other one. And then they go, and then they're all trying to work together. And in a Justice League thing, you would have seen how well they work together. And then the Flash does this, and Batman does this, and Superman does. Here, it's a comedy of errors, worse than it's kind of what happened in the show, but even more because all of them are trying to do it, and they're all screwing up worse, and Homelander's making the worst mistakes. Like even when they arrive at the airplane, there's this little kid like on the little window of the door going, "Yay, it's Homelander!" And Homelander rips the door open, not realizing that by doing that the kid's gonna fly out straight, stuff like that. And then he's trying to correct the path of the airplane, but he doesn't calculate his speed, so he takes off the whole half of the airplane. And eventually, they do manage to make it so it doesn't crash into the towers, but instead it crashes into the Brooklyn Bridge and essentially destroys the Brooklyn Bridge. And that was the 9/11 story in that universe. But the Vought guys covered it all up.
Right.
So in there, you see, like, imagine a 4-year-old told, "Hey, go save these people."
Right.
It's a similar thing. So it's not only about like him being rageful, it's also about like he actually is not capable of being a good planner and all these things, you know?
Right. And you see that he loves to use his laser beams because and I love that too, because when you think about Superman and all the things he can do, why would he ever fight with people when he could just laser them?
Right.
Yeah, I always wonder that. It's like, so can't he turn invisible too in some universe?
No, well, maybe in some universe, but in general, he can move so fast as to be invisible.
Right, he can move super fast. He can use laser
almost
beams.
as fast as the Flash.
Right, so why would he bother with trying to manhandle you when he could just incinerate you with his eyeballs?
Right.
Or if a missile is coming, why would he bother with trying to?
Right.
Why would he just laser it?
Laser it.
And you see that with Homelander. He's just always lasering everything.
And in fact, that's a great point because, again, he shows up to that terrorist cell. Now, you don't see any good planning from his part. He literally just shows up. He's like, "All right, you're the real heroes." And then he walks in, and all he has got to do, he's not trying to avoid being shot. He's not anything. He's just walking through, lasering everyone.
Yeah.
Which I guess, but it just shows that he's not a high-functioning planner, like a mature, calm planner and stuff.
Right.
He's really just operating out of impulse more than anything.
Right. So we see him that as Elizabeth Shue starts to reject him because she doesn't really see him as an equal. I think she sees him like what he is, which is like a child, and she has a job to do, and she just thinks of him as a coworker.
And she is scared of him.
And she's scared of him, but not necessarily initially. She's mainly just like, "Look, you're a coworker. It's my job when I'm at work to put on a good show for everyone." We also get a look into her psychology very briefly. She says she moved around a lot as a kid, which I don't know what that means. Could mean a lot of different things. But it looks like Elizabeth Shue also, her character, Madeline, I believe her character name is, it has some kind of psychological issue as well. She's very driven to succeed at the business, which isn't unusual for people to be like, but you don't really see a lot of love in her life. She doesn't seem to have any friends or a romantic partner.
Well, and I think we can trace it to where it started, because if she had stayed with Daniel's son, then she wouldn't have ran off with the football player and wouldn't have had a heartbreak that would have triggered all these, lame things to happen to her.
But Daniel did go to Japan and fall in love with,
true. So he had his own good story.
Yeah.
Which then ended by the third movie.
Well, now it's on YouTube again.
I still haven't seen it. I
Yeah.
gotta watch the.
I wonder if she shows up. I doubt it. Anyway. And then she became a sex worker in Las Vegas, and then it really
it's a
became
tumultuous life.
Yeah.
She's like.
Her hair is fantastic still, though.
Yes.
She's always had just fantastic, voluminous blonde hair. So when Elizabeth Shue, so to people like me and Barrow's age, Elizabeth Shue is like quite something,
Yes.
because she was the girlfriend in a lot of different, like the Adventures of Babysitting.
Yep.
Anyway.
And she was in Back to the Future.
Like the original, right?
No, she was the replacement.
Oh, she was the replacement.
Yeah, she was in
okay.
Back to the Future 2.
Oh, okay.
And 3, therefore, yeah.
So Elizabeth Shue rejects him, I think, because she also has attachment issues, but she's at work and she's very driven to do well at work, and she's a very, very adept corporate person.
Right.
And
in fact, she's kind of, well, not kind of. She is using Homelander to advance her career.
Right.
Yeah.
Which everyone's doing at that business, including Homelander to some extent. But Homelander is solely focused. He wants a mommy, and he deserves a mommy, but he's not going to get a mommy. And when Elizabeth Shue rejects him, we see in the next scene, Homelander goes back to Queen Maeve to, like we see this kind of weird where he's like suddenly trying to hit on her again. And she's like, where is this coming from? And we see that he was controlling and abusive. So now we're in the past with Queen Maeve.
Yeah.
See, with Elizabeth Shue, he's stalkery and obsessive and boundary. And at one point, she just says, Homelander, we need boundaries. But we see him turn back to Queen Maeve, and Queen Maeve is more of an equal in terms of age and the way he sees her. And so...
And powers.
Not
exactly, but close.
Yeah. And so we get this glimpse into their past relationship in the TV show universe anyway, in which it's implied that Homelander was very controlling and abusive to Queen Maeve back then. And this is an example of someone getting into the preoccupied attachment style, or disorganized / preoccupied, where you are desperate for attachment and security. You don't really trust other people, and you actually don't believe that people are going to love you just innately. And so you believe you have to control other people, and you're very hurt by even hints of rejection, even if it's not actual rejection. And you do a lot of different behaviors to try to get the other person to be close to you. And if none of those things work, then you resort to, desperation, which can be very controlling and very abusive, which they show Homelander doing with Queen Maeve.
Yeah.
Is it like that in the comic?
So in the comic, Queen Maeve is also, as far as we know in the beginning of the comic, the second most powerful one. And she is an alcoholic, and you get the sense, and she pretty much explains it over time, that she's been sexually harassed heavily since she joined the team until probably she exerted enough power over some of them. But like in the comic, what's the gal, the Starlight?
Yeah.
When she joins, it's not the Aquaman dude. It's Homelander, Black Noir, and A-Train. All of them have sexually harassed her right off the bat. And that's the sense you got, that Queen Maeve had the same kind of treatment for a long time when she joined. And so she's well past jaded and hurt and abused, but she's also very, very powerful. So they like no longer mess with her, but she's a total wreck emotionally. So it's very similar. I don't quite remember if the two of them had a relationship. It's quite possible. I don't remember. It's been a while since I read all of it.
So so we see that they had a past relationship, and I thought that was pretty interesting. So we also see that with Homelander, that no one really loves him. They love his persona, they love what he can do, and there's no real connection. So even in his desperation, he's not, the only sort of real love that he gets is through the fans.
Right.
And that can only be done in big crowds. Like, he can't actually go to those people and say, well, can you be my mommy? Because they're going to be like, huh? So he has to be like this Jesus character, like at the religious fair. He's like, I will be your Jesus. And anyway.
And his co-workers definitely fear him, but that's it.
Yeah.
It's not even clear
they respect him. They quote unquote respect him and talk to him only because they think he's going to kill him.
That's the thing, is it's not even clear that they respect, as in, well, but he is pretty bad. And it's like not even that. It's more like, well, I don't want to die. I just don't want to die.
Right. And then at the end, we see he kills both of his parents, essentially. He kills his dad and the doctor, and he kills his mommy, which is Elizabeth Shue, which obviously people with disorganized and preoccupied attachment don't do, at least, not as a symptom of their issue. But it is interesting that that's the poetic arc of his story, that he resolves to compensate for his pain by killing those who refused or wouldn't or weren't able to give him the parental love that he deserved.
It's a brutal scene.
Yeah.
Although I also was wondering, he must have the ability to graduate how much laser he puts out. Because otherwise, because in some scenes, the thing cuts through anything like
Yeah.
immediately, versus here was like burning in for a bit.
Right. I thought the same thing. So the last little thing I'll say about Homelander is that during the airplane scene, if you look at it one way, it's just like, oh, he's a psychopath. He doesn't really care about anything. But in that moment, the way that people also were the same way about and we're interpreting Cersei from Game of Thrones in a similar way. Oh, Cersei is a psychopath. She's a monster. And I was like, no. Like, she's a woman in a man's world. She loves her kids. She has very real threats based on the fact that these kids are from her twin brother and not the king, whom she's married to. And the only way to get power in this world is to be like king and queen, or at least close to that situation. And the way you get there is by, killing or screwing
Being
over.
ruthless.
And that's the way everyone's playing the game. And all she really wants is for her kids to be safe, and she needs to be safe in order to protect her kids. And
for example, she wasn't the one trying to fully murder Sean Bean, right? Like, she was actually like, oh, don't kill,
yeah, right. She wasn't saying like, let's kill everyone. She was like, we need power. We need to be careful, because if we don't have power, then the rumors will start to crop up about my kids, which will get all of us killed. I mean, that was a real thing. They didn't really depict that. Like, the king would have killed Cersei and the 3 kids.
Right.
Like, it would have been, oh, they're all dead. These are all Jaime's kids. My wife has been having sex with Jaime.
Everyone is dead in this situation, except the king.
and that would have been, that's normal justice. No one would have been like, whoa. They would have been like, oh, well, yeah. I mean, it'd be like today when someone kills someone, they go to jail for life. It's like, oh yeah, that's justice.
Well, and if the king didn't do that, then he'd lose the respect. People are like, oh, I guess the
or
king's
someone
not that
else,
strong.
or someone to kill him or kill, So like Cersei, Homelander is focused on pleasing Elizabeth Shue. So he's in the plane and he's trying it because he wants to please Elizabeth Shue, because she wants to get that contract with the government, which I just thought was a brilliant, very accurate, probable situation that would happen in a a situation like this. I thought it was a little improbable that the government wouldn't be a little bit more enthusiastic. I mean, can you imagine? It's like if America had all these superheroes, just Homelander alone,
right?
I can't imagine any politician being like, nah.
The problem, so in the graphic novel, they make it a little more obvious why they haven't, because essentially the government started the thing in the first place, and they know all the data, and so they know just how difficult it would be to have soldiers that had these powers,
how to control them. Yeah.
And anyway, so there's a lot more of that. There's a lot more of why the boys even got started in the first place because of that, and blah 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 blah.
Right.
But
so
anyways,
and the airplane, he's solely focused on Elizabeth Shue. So he's trying to save the plane. He doesn't really care about the people. He cares about Elizabeth Shue. He fucks it up by using his lasers again, and then he's like, okay. He thinks about it for like 3 seconds, and he's like, well, I'm not going to be able to save all these people. And basically, because the thing is anyone who dies on this plane is his fault, because the aside from the 1 or 2 people who died from the terrorists, the terrorists, it wasn't clear that they were going to kill everyone on the plane, like from the TV show.
I see. Okay.
It was a hijacked plane.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, because this wasn't 9/11 in the show. That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
So we don't know.
Right.
It's not like, well, we did everything when we saved half the plane. Because they were going to, it wasn't clear. So
right.
If anyone dies, it's his fault. So if he saves even if he manages to save half the plane, those other half people might have died because he fucked up.
Right.
Which gets Elizabeth Shue to dislike him for various different reasons. And so he very quickly says, oh, they all have to die because they're all witnesses to the fact that I just fucked this up.
Yeah.
So he, and Queen Maeve, for whatever reason, has just more of a heart about this sort of thing, and has a hard time. It's just a wonderful scene, the way it was portrayed.
Right, and I wonder, because you know how some of them, like Starlight, were still given the stuff as a baby, but they weren't taken into a lab the whole time.
Right.
So I wonder if Queen Maeve had less, maybe attachment disorders and stuff.
Right.
But I will say, I had a misremembered, because it'd been a while. So I went back and reread some and rechecked the comic book. The plane scene is actually pretty consistent, other than the fact that it was 9/11 related and the whole team was involved. But it still was two things. Homelander was still trying to make it work somehow. So he wasn't like, ha ha ha, I'm going to kill everyone here, which I kind of misremembered that. No, he was trying to save them, but not from the, I'm a superhero, I must save these people. But as you say, well, I'm a Vought employee, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And then when it was clear that everything got messed up, there's all these moments where it's terrible mess ups. Then that's when he's like, all right, I'm out of here, right? And Queen Maeve is in fact trying to be like, but it's like, no, we gotta go.
Interesting.
And so it's actually that part is very consistent. And to your point, he's not simply like, ooh, since I'm a psychopath, I can watch all these people die.
Right. And I think that's this mistake that people make when they're watching things like this, that which denies the brilliance of the writing and the characters, that, oh, it's just psychopath, like the tagline for a lot of people is, oh, watch The Boys, Superman, he's a psychopath, he does all these horrible things.
Right.
No. Like, he has massive attachment issues. He's a 4-year-old in a superhero's body. He's desperate for Elizabeth Shue's love, who Elizabeth Shue's character, for good reason, isn't really available emotionally for him. Yeah. And so he's desperate. If she would have just, if he would have moved into her house and got a crib next to the baby, he probably would have been a better person in a lot of ways.
Right.
But because when you give people the love and security that they need, then they're not desperate anymore. Yeah. But the part of it that I also loved was that the accuracy, because being from Seattle and having so many family members who work for Boeing, and just knowing things about physics, because I've actually gone to Boeing as a kid when my dad would take me, and I would watch like them constructing the planes, and they would show like what the walls were made out of, and they're made out of, in an airplane, not to scare everyone, but they're made out of this extremely light honeycomb aluminum.
Right, it's got to fly, right? It can't weigh.
Yeah, you could probably crush it with like a hammer if you wanted to, if you hit it in a certain angle. But given the way that these airplanes are constructed, it never incurs that kind of force.
Right.
But anyway, airplanes are extremely fragile when they're not used the way that they're supposed to be used. One of the ways they're not supposed to be used is with a single point of force placed on the side of the fuselage.
Yeah.
They are meant to land on their landing gear. They're meant to fly in the air. They're meant to, take off and stuff. And the jet engines there's support for the jet engines to be, connected to the plane instead of ripped off. But you put a single, hand that has enough force to be able to push back on the plane, your hand is going to go through it like butter.
Right.
It just go honk. So in the same way that if you take a gun, for example, like a car, take a gun, just a regular handgun, and shoot the door. Well, the bullet goes right through.
Right.
Now the door is very strong. If for what it's designed for, when you're sitting as a passenger and you bump up against, you don't go flying out. If you're leaning up against the car as a human being, or if you bump up against it with a bag, the bag doesn't just annihilate. But if you put you put all that force in a tiny spot, then it's like butter, it just goes straight through.
Right.
And Superman 2 or Superman Returns, I don't know if you remember this movie from, I don't know,
yeah, with
15 years
Kevin
ago.
Spacey.
Yeah. It was, the beginning of the movie was just a scene where Superman is trying to save this plane, and the way that he saves it is the plane, for some reason, is going to crash in the middle of a baseball field during a packed, sold out baseball game. And Superman is trying to stop the plane. He's having a hard time. And so he goes to the nose of the plane with his hands and stops the plane. There's a little bit of crumplage. They show a little bit, but it's very slight. if he were to do that in real life, his body would go
right.
straight through. He'd be in row 13
Right.
by the time he realized, oh, the nose of the imagine you take a 747 and just set it on top of like a steel pole. What do you think's going to happen? You think the steel pole? You think it's going to just balance on?
Just hold it.
The steel pole's going to go straight fucking through that thing.
No, man, you're too pessimistic.
Yeah.
Like here, do this test. Put yourself with a pole, a little thin pole on your tummy, and balance yourself that way. It's fine.
Yeah. Or an indestructible, like the lead you put into a pencil.
Yes,
and just that small of a force, that amount of square inch, but it's indestructible, and just try to balance yourself like on your sternum.
It'll be fun.
Yeah. So I loved that, but I wish they would have showed it a little bit better, but I don't think they had the budget for it or something. And anyway, he just says, he's like, look, if I try to stop the plane, my hand's going to go right. He says something like
there's nothing for me to support myself.
Yeah, I'm gonna in the comic book, he rips off.
He rips through because he was trying, like to your point, in his head, he's just gonna hit the back of the plane so angle it differently, but hitting the back of the plane at the speed he was going with his mass just ripped the whole thing off.
Right, which is accurate. And so I just loved that. I mean, because there's so many serial, like I always say this, just one example of the many things I'm watching superhero movies and just going, oh my God, is when Tony Stark is in his iron suit and he either lands. There are three things that happen to him that would turn him into a pile of goo.
Right.
One is when he lands. He is going at what looks to be like 1,000 miles an hour and comes to a complete stop by landing on a road.
Right.
As I always say, like the liquefied things that could liquefy on him would come oozing out of the boots.
But that's only if you don't do the superhero pose. If you do the superhero pose, it distributes the weight evenly.
Yeah. When he takes off, he goes from 0 to 500 miles an hour in the span of 1 second. You put a human being in an F-16,
right,
and you do something even 10% of that, and the person either passes out from their blood.
Right.
The other situation is when he's hit with a force that shoots him across the highway.
Right.
Newsflash: the force of the fist of Hulk hitting the iron suit. Okay, the iron suit, quote unquote, doesn't penetrate, but all of that force goes directly into the thing behind that. If I take let's say a golf ball and I put it up against Umberto's head, and then I take a golf club.
Man, this is sounding very violent.
and I just hold the golf ball and I take a golf club and I swing and I hit the golf ball. Well, okay. I'm not going to annihilate the golf ball. The golf ball is intact, but all that force is going to go to the next thing behind the golf ball, which is Umberto's head.
But it's a very hard head.
Which would be the same thing as me taking a golf club. So when Tony Stark lands on the ground, all of that force goes to the iron suit, which is strong, and then directly into the body, which would annihilate it. And so in this episode of The Boys, Homelander's like, look, if I try to stop this plane, like I'm gonna shred it.
Yeah, I can't do it. He's like, I can't do it. So Garth Ennis, the writer, or Ennis, he hates normal superhero stuff. So one of the reasons he wrote The Boys was actually kind of, getting at that, just like pointing fun at just all the ridiculousness of superhero tropes.
That's great. I like that. And the one thing I will say is that it's possible if he would have grabbed one of the landing gear, if he somehow figured out how to access that, he could have ripped off the bottom door. The landing gear is directly connected to the main frame or the main structure of the entire plane.
Right. And it has to be able to withstand.
Right. So he could have grabbed onto that and tried.
Yeah. But then the thing he
but,
said,
but it might have like flung out of control because the aerodynamics would have been really weird. And
well, it's the other thing he said is that so in Superman's case, he seems to have some ability that is not physical in nature. It's got to be somewhat magical in a way, because he's able to push against things with incredible forces, even in the vacuum of space. But what Homelander also pointed out is like, what am I pushing against? Like, in other words, he doesn't have flight abilities that have unlimited thrust capacity.
Oh.
He can fly himself and I guess carry Maeve and stuff, but he can't carry a jetliner.
Oh, so he's not like Superman in that way.
Right.
He's strong, but he's not.
He is strong. He could probably lift the airplane.
Yeah.
But he can't fly. He can't propel somehow. Whatever causes his flight ability doesn't have that kind of thrust power.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which is interesting to think about, because that's the thing. If Superman is in the middle of space and he has to move a spaceship, right? Well, there must be some magical thing that he's doing that causes that to be possible.
Yeah, it's magic.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a break and let's go into our final thoughts about the psychology of the boys.
The boys.
All right, we're back from the break. If Homelander was to, talk on TV about joining the Patreon for Psychology in Seattle, what would he say and or do?
Am I being filmed here?
Yeah, you're being filmed.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Is it on? Hi. As many of you know, we are here to protect you, to serve you, to make you the real heroes. What is this light on my head? Is it still filming? Anyways, we want to ask you for a donation, but it's not for us. It's so that we can really get this thing. Something like that.
So just going to my notes here, the show depicts in a very real and stark way sexual harassment, and assault something that you wouldn't see in other shows, and it's very stark, but exactly depicted. I mean, it's like some people might watch and go like, well, that was a little over the top. And it's like, that shit happens. Annie goes first day at work. She meets this guy and she's like this, she's desperate. She wants to fit in. And this guy's like, oh, I know how to work this angle. I've been here before.
Yep.
And he pulls his pants down, takes out his junk, and starts rubbing himself. And that happens. And now in the show, you're like, whoa, over the top, or whoa, that was kind of shocking, or that's kind of funny that the way they shot it, because they show his ass, And the fact is that shit happens. Harvey Weinstein alone, which is one of thousands of millions of people who have done this around the world, did exactly that.
Yeah.
He would get a young woman who was trying to work her way up into the, in show business or wherever, and he would just pull down his pants and whip out. And Bill Clinton, I think, did this from accounts anyway, right? And it's an age-old, for whatever. It's like sending dick pics. It's one of the things that people do that apparently they want to do.
Yeah.
So I thought that they depicted that. I think well. I think it's pretty shocking. I guess if you haven't watched it, you should watch out if you're triggered by such things.
One of the things that I wondered about it is in the TV show, it was just the Deep, the character of the Deep, which is the Aquaman type character, and Annie went along with it because she didn't want to be rejected. But you get the sense that she can easily overpower the Deep. In the graphic novel, like I said, it was Homelander, Black Noir, and A-Train. And A-Train in the comic is like a total asshole. You know, like it was the three of them, and Homelander alone could have easily obliterated Starlight. So in the comic book, she still actually goes along with it, quote unquote, voluntarily, which of course it isn't. And then she still ends up in the bathroom throwing up and all these things. But I thought I was a little sad in a way because I was like, well, the way they put it in the TV show, she could have said no to the Deep and not been threatened with her life.
But that's a very important point to make, I think, I'm sure they weren't really making that point. I think they were trying to make Homelander more likable.
Yeah.
Because if that happened in the beginning.
Yeah,
and I actually didn't
true.
like the fact that they were trying to make the Deep more likable as the season went on.
Oh, yeah, all his guilt problems.
Yeah, and him being...
Because he got raped kind of, too.
Yeah,
yeah.
and him like with the lobster and all that.
Yeah,
kind
that
of
was a little weird, right? Because it was like, oh, okay, I guess even rapists are raped too.
Right, but I was like, no, I'm not going to forgive him for what he did in that first episode. Right. So, but that is a more important point, which is that when people are sexually abused, raped, harassed, it is often not about physical power.
Yeah,
it can be for sure.
Yeah.
It's about social power, and which is much more powerful. Yeah. A 4.5 foot tall woman can sexually harass a 6'5", 250-pound man. Can domestically abuse someone like that. It happens frequently. It's not a matter of physical power.
That's a great point.
It's
actually
a factor, but
didn't she
really.
actually punch him first? Or something? Or didn't she do something? Because then he was like, well, I'll just say you attacked me or whatever.
No, well, she sort of built her powers up.
Oh, and something like the TV destroyed. Yeah, right. So actually that is an excellent point. And now I see, and I agree with you, that's even more effective, however intentional it was or not. Because you're right. In the graphic novel, the sense I got is like, well, she really had no choice physically. Here, it's like she did, and yet it's still so unfortunately powerful, that social pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
The Deep goes to therapy. Was that therapist supposed to be working for Vought, or was that a legitimate? Because
I don't know.
Yeah, it was very brief, but it was just...
None of that happens in the comic book. I don't know.
It was just kind of funny, the scene, and it was terrible therapy, by the way. Just tons of reassurance. Like it made me think like the therapist worked for Vought, and that the therapist was just there to try to make the Deep go back to the way he was.
The Deep in the comic, by the way, they're very different characters, like, and the storyline's not at all the same. But in the comic book, he wears, those big metal helmets with the round thing, like the old-timey, like he wears something like that, and they're always making fun of him because of it, like everyone else, and the boys are always like, because he comes out of the water, and they're always like, what the hell? But he's actually the only good planner in the team. Oh. It's funny.
All right, so let's go to some of the things we liked and disliked about the TV show. Berto, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I was afraid because, I'm always afraid when stuff comes out that is based on something I liked. I will say The Boys is a comic that I liked, but it's not in my top 5, but it is in my top 10 kind of thing. I watched Preacher a little bit, which was another Garth Ennis story, and they made a TV show out of that one. And I actually didn't like what they did with that one because not only did they change it a lot, but it also was a lot more boring than the graphic novel was. I was afraid that this was going to happen with this one. When the show started, that very first episode, I was like, oh man, they're changing quite a few things. But they made it interesting in its own way, and they made it it was very well done. So in the end, I enjoyed it. I thought it was very well done. There is only one key thing, that is that the Butcher storyline is, they kind of ruined what they ended up doing in the comic book. Like, there's no way they can do what they did in the comic book now, based on how this season ended, unless they completely cheat and it's like, what you saw is not real or whatever, And that's sad because I actually always felt Butcher was the main character, and.
What'd you like about the TV show? Let's just enough about the comic.
Enough about the comic. Well, I loved Homelander. I loved Starlight. I loved both the character as well as her performance. And I really liked the guy that cast as Butcher. He's really cool. I liked most of his scenes, most of his interactions. I thought the way it was shot was great. The scenes with Homelander kicking ass are awesome. Like, it's just, I mean, it's dark because you don't like him, but he goes into that cell, the terrorist cell, and it's just like, it's just awesome. And like you said, a lot of the psychology of it and the way they really try to present things in sort of a believable, realistic way, I really enjoyed. So I liked that for sure.
Yeah, I thought it was funny. There's a lot of funny moments.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like you said, the acting is great, the directing, the writing. I really believed the Huey-Annie relationship progression through this season. I thought they were great performances by the two of them. They have these little facial expressions that they would insert into that illuminated what they were thinking about that I thought was really great. I really believed Butcher's pain and his anger. I really believed the Homelander relationship with Elizabeth Shue. I thought that the two of them masterfully acted, and again, written and directed in this way that you really just, because there's so many cheesy things that they could have done with the acting and with the performance and the writing, and I thought it was very just masterfully done.
Yeah.
I find that it was an interesting, so the thing that I'm worried about is like, people will look at The Boys. One, it's a weird title. It's like, what is that, The Boys?
Yeah.
The second thing is that, oh, it's another superhero stupid thing. I think that The Boys, in some ways, might ruin Marvel movies for me. In the same way, like, if I look at The Boys and I look at Into the Spider-Verse, I feel like I might not ever enjoy Marvel movies even somewhat. You know, I feel like they've got to be so good in the future, or the DC movies for sure, because they were frequently terrible. I mean, not terrible, but just not great.
Careful.
The Aquaman was terrible, you know. But anyway, because like when Battlestar Galactica, the reboot came out 10, 15 years ago, that to some extent ruined Star Trek for me.
I see.
Next Generation, because it was such a leap forward in what you can do with this form. It's like, I'm guessing for some people, like when they watch movies like, or TV shows like The Walking Dead, it might kind of ruin your traditional zombie movies,
right,
you know,
right.
Where it's like, oh,
well, like 28 Days Later did that,
right?
In a way, right? It's like, oh, zombies can run.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all over.
Right. Like, you can't really watch 60s zombies movies anymore and enjoy it the way that, because of what 28 Days Later sort of did. And so I just feel like The Boys is a wonderful show that is within a very silly genre, which is superhero, but I think it's so much deeper than that. And I on some level, I'm worried it's not going to get the attention it needs, but on another level, I'm kind of glad it won't, maybe, because it's like The Tick is another Amazon show. Have you seen it?
Not the new Tick, no. I used to watch the old Tick, but
it's great. I mean, the old Tick was great too, but the new one is similar in that it's these short little episodes and well done, and just great performances, great writing, and no one's talking about The Tick, but I love it, kind of a thing. And so it's similar with like Fleabag, for example.
Right.
I love that show, and I want it to stay small, because like I've talked about, I loved Game of Thrones, the books. When the TV show came out, I was like very pleasantly surprised. And for the first few seasons, no one was watching the show. No one knew about the books. Something happened around season 3 or 4 or something, and it just never stopped growing in intensity. And then by the time you get to seasons 8 or 9 of the TV show, everyone's like, you know, shitting all over it, like they were there from the beginning, you know, and it's just like, just go. It's similar to Star Wars. Sometimes I just want all the people, just go back to whatever top 40 bullshit you were watching before and stay away from these, you know, wonderful products that I've, you know, I've had pros and cons about. It's not like I was eternally in love with it, but I just didn't like all these voices talking about my thing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, totally. And I don't think that, unfortunately, I think that's too late. Ship has sailed with The Boys. It's a runaway success. It's super highly rated. Everyone is talking about it.
But I don't know if many people are watching it. You know, like
I don't know, man. All of a sudden, I went from, because I was on the other side, which was, I heard The Boys was coming out. I heard it was coming out. All of a sudden, I didn't realize it came out, and all over my feeds and everyone I talked to was like, "Oh my gosh, The Boys!" Like I had some boys over to my place one night we were gonna watch bad movies, and we didn't have anything good to watch. I was like, "Hey, do you guys want to watch the first episode of this new series?" And they're like, "Sure." And I was thinking like, man, I'm sure they're not gonna like it, but I want to watch it, and so might as well. I was like, after the first episode was over, I'm like, okay, do you guys want to watch something else? They're like, well, why don't we keep watching this? We watched like the first 5 episodes in a row.
Oh my God.
Because they were so into it. And then I asked them, like, did you finish? I was like, yeah, dude, it's awesome. Then at work, a coworker is like, hey, hey, please stop reprinting the t-shirts for a second. I need to talk to you. I'm like, yeah, what's up? Like, have you seen The Boys? The Boys is amazing, blah, blah. And none of them have read the comic book. So this is its own phenomenon.
Well, that's
So
interesting.
I think you're screwed.
All right. Another thing I loved about the show, which might get bad in the future, given that the budget of the show might skyrocket, given that the popularity is skyrocketing, is that they didn't have a lot of CGI fights and special power kinds of things.
Yeah.
It was pretty low key, and I liked that a lot. Because one of the things that I think really plagues the DC movies is they're minded. They've got like one toe in directing, writing, acting, and they've got like 9 other toes in how are we going to make this look cool.
Yeah, in battles.
And it is not the direction to go in.
Yeah.
You gotta have 9 toes in story, and 1 toe in how to make things look cool. Maybe 2 or 3 toes. But the point is that this show has, you'd be hard pressed to think of many really heavy special effects scenes.
Yeah, it's mostly Homelander stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you see the Aquaman guy, he dives into water. We never see him underwater.
Yeah.
Right? There's never scenes of him talking to, the dolphins.
Hello, Aquaman.
Yeah, he refers to it. There's no the scene of when they're on the airplane,
Right.
and the plane is going down. It's very practical effects. There's wind machines and debris flying, and there's this one little decision that sort of typifies the whole thing, which is that Homelander is holding his hand out to Maeve, and he's being nice. He's like, it's voluntary. Don't go down with the plane. Come with me. And he's like, let's go, because he could have just grabbed her, but he's like, come with me. It's your choice, but we need to go. And Queen Maeve is, it's like the kids are like, save us, take my daughter. It's just this heart, and you just see on her face, her hair's whipping around, and she gives in and she goes to him. And the two of them and I get chills thinking about it, the two of them just kind of step off screen.
Yeah.
You don't see him jump out the plane.
Out with
you don't
her.
see the special effects of the cape flying in the wind. The two of them, they just sort of step out.
Yep.
And you don't even see him step out. You just see him step behind the bulkhead.
Yeah.
And you just don't know. Well, they just stepped out of the plane.
Right.
And it's decisions like that where it's like, let's not make this about spectacle.
Yeah, I wonder now that they're gonna get more money. But you're right. But this is true so often, right? With Jaws, with everything we can think of, Star Wars. Less budget is not necessarily a bad thing.
The gore I liked and disliked. The one thing that I can say that I enjoyed about the gore, like the cunnilingus scene and translucent exploding and Robin exploding for that matter.
Yeah.
You see like a jawbone like tumbling through the air with Robin, pretty gruesome. Is that well, let me ask you one question, because this is one thing about the comics I was trying to actually figure out was, in the TV show, she's one step out onto the street and he runs into her. In the comic books, they're like at a fair.
Yeah, it's totally different. They're at a fair he's Scottish. Don't get me started, because like the Huey in the comic is completely different than the Huey in the show. The Huey in the show is not a complete nerd. I mean, they try to make him that way, but like he's not, and he quickly is pretty cool and blah blah.
But I don't think they were trying to make him a nerd though.
In the
TV
comic,
show.
he's pretty nerdy. He's balding. He's Simon Pegg, and like
he looks like Simon Pegg.
He was designed explicitly like Simon Pegg.
Oh.
So the artist had seen Simon Pegg in a TV show, and he really liked that look, and he's like, "Ooh, that's my Huey," and he made the character look like him.
Probably from The Office. Or wait,
not The Office.
He wasn't in The Office.
No, some show in the UK. Well, then when the comic book started getting kind of popular, someone pointed out to Simon Pegg, "Is like, dude, someone made you into a character," and then the two eventually met, and then Simon Pegg actually did the intro for the collected work, the graphic novel. But obviously he was too old to play the character, so they made him the dad. The thing is that...
Oh, I didn't even realize that. That's hilarious.
Yeah. But the Simon Pegg, the Huey in the comic is this Scottish, super like neurotic...
I was
like,
wondering why they made.
Dude.
I was wondering why they made Simon Pegg the dad, because I'm like, his accent was so bad.
Right.
And
it was
but it all makes sense.
An homage. But anyways, yes, so they're in a fair. They're not in the street. They're just holding hands, the same thing. And A-Train doesn't actually crash into her. A-Train launches a villain he's after, and the villain, and he punches the villain so hard, or whatever. He launches him so fast that the villain's the one that basically crashes through her, rips her off of his hands, and smashes into a wall. So she's like all smashed into a wall and stuff like that. But A-Train technically caused it because he was, speeding around trying to catch the guy and stuff like that.
And
but
do they have Compound V in the...
They do, but Compound V is not only, in fact, how they created them, but it's not like this underground drug that they're trying to trade for performance enhancement. It does have side effects if you... There are some similarities, but one of the biggest changes is in the comic book, the boys have all taken this purified Compound V so that they are super strong.
Oh.
And it makes sense because otherwise any one of the superheroes could immediately kill all of them. It's kind of... and Frenchie, for example, is like this badass assassin, and the woman's like twice as lethal and stuff like that. So there's very big differences like that. In some ways, it's great that they made them vulnerable humans in the show.
Right.
As long as you don't think about it too hard, because like the problem is that any one of the superheroes can kill them instantly.
Yeah, there was only one point in the TV show when I noticed that, and that was when Homelander actually had the faces of those 5 guys. Of the boys, including
when
the
he
girl.
got the little footage from
which was kind of cheesy because it was like Mesmer had these like perfectly cropped pictures
from his home security.
From his home security. I mean, if anyone's ever seen like a door, it was a doorbell. It wasn't a home security.
Right.
If you've ever seen a Ring thing, it doesn't look like that. Anyway, the one point where I was like, Homelander now knows who these people are. All he has to do is go to his assistants and say, "Who are these? What are the names of these people?"
Yeah.
And then he would just go and kill them. Like there was this one point where I was like, "So they're all dead, right?"
Right.
But but they didn't. All they needed was some kind of scene where Homelander's like, maybe I should like try to play this different.
Right.
I don't know.
In the comic book, what happens is the boys are an official CIA outfit.
Right.
They've been enhanced. Now, Homelander...
I would have hated that, by the way. I would have been like, oh, great. They're all superheroes.
Well, sort of, but
like I wouldn't worry about any of them.
But they were done specifically by the government because otherwise they can't control the superheroes. So it's like if you're going to have cops for the superheroes...
But it would have been way worse, I think. And I heard about this difference. And I get why the comic book could be rad, too.
Yeah.
But one, I hate it when my lead characters are invincible. So Huey is just a regular guy, and I feel like that's very important, even Butcher and all of them, but mainly Huey. The second thing is if you believe that your main heroes, the boys, have the backing of the United States government, the CIA, I'm just less worried. Because, like, okay, these guys die. Well, the CIA will just create 5 other guys, and they'll take... These are very unique, very weak. They're Luke Skywalkers. They could one small, errant bullet and they're dead. I want that. I hate all that.
But they're Luke Skywalkers without the Force. That's the problem. The boys
But
in
Luke
the comic,
Skywalker, one blaster. And
sure.
Well,
So the boys in the comics, Homelander could still take all of them with one hand. Like they were not at Homelander's level, but they were slightly better than the average level of the superheroes. So, and Frenchie was like sort of a psycho killer. Like, and the female, the Asian gal, Kimiko, she was. Anyways, my point is that there were all these amazing scenes. So I'm not saying they needed to do the same exact story, but there were all these amazing scenes that were fun because they could kick ass and take names, but they can't kick anyone's ass in this show.
And I like that because I can't kick anyone's ass. I certainly can't kick like anyone's.
But think about like
I
what did the Frenchie do?
I want to relate. He's a dedicated guy to Kimiko. He knows how to shoot guns. He has heart. This is the origin of like good writing, and this is why we've drifted into this world where Spider-Man is bulletproof. Spider-Man was not bulletproof when I was a kid. That was not a thing. Spider-Man was a regular dude who could do awesome things with webs,
sure.
And he had spidey sense, and he could climb walls. That was it. If he fell, he died. If he got shot, he died. If he went into space, he died. He was down to earth. Now, they just wave their hand and say nanorobots, and they solve. There's no,
sure.
Even a person like Quill, for example, I don't really worry about because he can fight someone like Thanos. Now, I enjoyed Infinity War a lot. I enjoyed Endgame. Fine, but I really liked Infinity War. I love, but I'm tired of this drift towards comic book trope, which is to have characters that I'm like, well, I'm watching these two people fight, but they're both going to survive this.
Well, so let me ask you to turn your question to yourself. What's special about the boys in this one? Because why the CIA could hire any 5 of them?
They're damaged. They are sad. They're grieving. They're angry. They're
How does that make them good? Like, and it makes them good at what exactly? What is it that they're doing?
They have heart. They have motivation. They can see. They can see the Matrix. They see the fact that these superheroes are not what the corporations are putting forth.
All right. So let's say that comes out. Oh man, they were creating kids. The superheroes still exist. Now what? What are they going to do about it?
The corporation will still spin it so that the people will be brainwashed to believing that they should back these superheroes. These 5 people, because of the pain they've been through, they are not susceptible to corporate and
sure. And what are they going to do about it?
They're trying to fight it.
I guarantee you, they're going to have to take Compound V in the 2nd season.
With their wit, with their clear mind, with their relationships with Annie and Huey.
But none of that hurts these people. Look at what happened to Butcher. Oh, I know how to get to the Homelander. He cares about... Oh, really? How did that go?
Maybe the story is not that they kill Homelander. Maybe the story is something different than that.
Well, that's okay. But they still need it. Well, I know. And it's just 2 different things. Because, like, the purpose in the comic is very clear and not controversial. These superheroes are out of control. I am mea culpa. We created Osama bin Laden. I get it. Well, now we need our little set of undercover CIA dudes that are going to go and regulate when they get out of hand. Okay, so now we know. And what are the boys trying to do? Oh, whenever the superhero is getting out of hand, they go and kick some ass. Except that there's some more shit to the story, and then more stuff happens. Here, it's unclear. Well, what are they trying to do? Well, they're trying to get to Homelander. How?
Well,
what are they trying to do?
What's Jon Snow's superpower? What's Tyrion's superpower?
Well, Jon Snow is apparently an amazing sword fighter.
But anyone could kill him if you get 5 swordsmen.
Well, sure, but he never lost a one-on-one match, and
Tyrion's smart, but he's not that smart. He makes mistakes.
But he's not going up against...
Daenerys has dragons.
But he's not going up against flying laser shooters, He's just going up against other humans, mostly.
And so that's the drift. Like, oh, well, if you have a Superman... your good guys have to be also Superman, and I don't think that's true.
Well,
and that's what's so beautiful about this show is that it's not like all the other bullshit shows out there. Your heroes can be regular people.
They can until you lift the cover and be like,
Frodo
hey,
Baggins. Frodo Baggins is a little hobbit, a gentle little hobbit from a hole who decides to completely save the land, and
Look,
he doesn't have a sword. He's not good with a sword. He has a ring.
No, that's not right. He was picked specifically because he was likely to be the least corruptible, so he could. Another way to
because
think
he's
about
not
it,
interested in power.
Right. Another way to think about it is the scene with A-Train. How did they finally get him to not kill them? Because he could have zoomed. By the way, that's the other thing. A-Train clearly can just zoom through a person, especially when he's high on V. Why didn't he do that in the scene with Starlight and Huey? We don't know. But
well, I think because the writers are trying their best to make the characters like A-Train, like the Deep, like Homelander, not as psychopathic as the comic books. And I think A-Train actually has a conscience.
Sure.
I don't actually...
Although he murdered his girlfriend, but sure.
But it's unclear if he was actually going to murder Huey in that moment.
All right,
he was very sad in that moment.
But certainly when he caught up with them and he's like, he has all the power. They can't do anything to him. They can't shoot a bullet at him. If he needs to, he can at least knock them out. The only thing they could do to him is the female came up and kicked his bones, broke his bones, because she's got the compound. So, case in point, number 2, what did they do? They just let him go? Why did they let him go?
Because they're good guys.
But that's their plan? Sometimes kick them when they're down and then let them go?
When he wakes up, he'll join the team.
No. So I'm saying there's some holes there, and I think they're going to have to take some Compound V in the second season.
Oh, that would ruin it.
They're going to have to, man, because what else are they going to do?
A-Train is going to be on the fence. Annie is in the good team.
Well, so they're going to gain superheroes. Fine.
The Deep might be on the fence.
Well, but then so all you're saying is that they are going to take Compound V, but just not themselves. They're going to get recruits that have Compound V.
Maybe.
Oh, that's the same thing with more characters. And it makes the characters that haven't taken the Compound V less interesting, less useful.
I also liked that they clearly showed that people like Annie and Translucent have similar powers to Superman, because and Queen Maeve, like in the superhero movies, they never really clearly show that these people are invincible.
Yeah.
They give this impression like they're not invincible, and then they have these scenes where you're like, oh, so Wonder Woman's invincible. Right. I thought she was just a real snazzy woman.
Right, a warrior.
Yeah, but she's invincible. But in this show, they just clearly show, no, Queen Maeve stands in front of a truck, and the truck disintegrates around her because she's invincible. Translucent is clearly invincible from the outside, unless you put a bomb up his butt, which I just thought was awesome. Annie is extremely strong, and they show her training early, before she became a 7, that she could punch bricks. She's maybe not as strong as Homelander, but she's, her hands are very strong. Her body is strong. Right. She's very strong. And I just like that it's like, we're not going to toy with you and then retcon the situation like, oh, no, this person has had this power this whole time. And all those times you were worried about that person in the past, your worry was misplaced. I just hated that, that sort of storytelling. And it's like, they're superheroes. Just tell us what their powers are up front. Now, Annie's superpowers are a little elusive, but they pretty much got to it. She uses light. She's strong. Yeah. She can blind people. She can burn things. She can manipulate electricity. That kind of, or somehow her power manipulates electricity or something. Anyway, I also like the superhero costumes, because I'm from the 70s when in the 80s when superhero costumes were superhero costumes. Mm-hmm. They used primary colors. Now, all the X-Men are in black. All the DC characters are basically in some shade of black. Yeah. All the Marvel characters have some sort of super dark look to them. Obviously, the Hulk still has to be green, but it's not as fluorescent green as the Hulk I grew up with. Right. And in the boys, Homelander has the primary colors. Right. Annie Starlight has white and gold, and
They're Nintendo characters.
yeah, and A Train has a blue outfit, and
Yeah.
I thought that was great because I'm getting so tired. Superman now wears like a black suit.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's like black with like a hint of red in the S.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
It's gotten so dark.
I like the 80s stuff, like T.J. Hooker on the television, Remington's. Did you watch T.J. Hooker and Remington Steele?
I watched, I watched both, but definitely Remington Steele. T.J. Hooker less so.
Yeah, Remington Steele was like, when that came out,
Yeah.
man, I just loved that show.
So fun.
In Huey's room, he had a tape organizer like my brother had, where this faux wood sort of shelf thing that you would, or this drawer thing. And at the end, did you notice that the sprinkler syncs up with the beat of the song?
No.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it starts out. Butcher is on the ground. You hear this sprinkler, and then this song comes in.
That's subtle.
It's sort of like an homage to Sleepwalking by Santo and Johnny,
Oh, interesting.
or Donna by things I didn't like. Is in the last few minutes here is Huey's t-shirts. So Huey, and to your point of like Huey's supposed to be this nerd.
Yeah.
In the TV show, I don't think they were trying to make him nerdy because like he had a friend who ran into him at the bar.
Yeah.
And so I don't think he was nerdy. I just think he was just like an average Joe. But the thing that he talks about is like, he's talking to Butcher. He's like, don't recruit me into this thing. Look, I got my top 3 bands are James Taylor, Simon and Garfunkel, and Billy Joel in that order. So he's clearly saying I'm a softie, and I like
Vanilla softy.
I like soft music.
Yeah.
But his T-shirts were the Ramones,
Oh, yeah.
2 Nirvana shirts,
That's true.
a Van Halen shirt, and an AC/DC shirt.
Yeah. That's not quite what we're sold. We're sold a...
Clearly, the costume people are not talking to the writing people.
That's funny.
The other thing that's driving me crazy about young people today, old man shakes fist at T-shirt, is that young people today are wearing what they believe to be cool band T-shirts, and they have no connection to that band.
Oh, no.
Now, when we were kids, if I walked into school when I was, 18 or 16, and I had a Black Flag shirt on because they were real popular, it was a popular symbol, and someone came to me and said, "Oh, what's your favorite song?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Well, you're wearing a Black Flag T-shirt." I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." They would have wedgied me out of the school. Now you have people like
Especially a Black Flag t-shirt.
I had a student.
Oh my God.
I had a student who was wearing a God damn
A
it,
t-shirt, shorts.
a Joy Division shirt.
I enjoyed it. Was it the... Oh, no, okay.
Yeah, the mountains.
The mountains, yeah.
Yeah.
The little...
Computer mountains.
Yeah.
And I looked at her, I was like, "Oh, Joy Division, cool." And she's like, "Huh?" Like, "Oh, well, you're wearing a Joy Division shirt." She's like, "Huh? Oh, this? Who's that?" And I was like, so she doesn't even know who they are. Okay.
I had that at Disney, not Disney, at Universal Studios recently. A dude was wearing, and it wasn't a kid. It was like, I don't know
Yeah.
how old, but a dude was wearing one of those. I'm like, love it. He's like, what? The t-shirt. Oh, okay.
Right, because when we were kids, to wear a T-shirt of a band, you were saying something. I have a Rush T-shirt. I have a Depeche Mode T-shirt. I have a Anthrax or a Metallica.
It wasn't a random purchase.
It's not. Yeah, you wouldn't just buy like, "Oh, I think
Right.
it looks cool," because you would be self-conscious about the fact that you don't listen to that shit.
I can only imagine wearing like a Tool t-shirt. Someone's like, "Oh yeah, what's your song?" And you're like, "Song? Oh,
Yeah.
I just like the design, dude."
So either the costume department was way off kilt. I mean, he did have a Billy Joel T-shirt and a James Taylor T-shirt at some point, but most of the T-shirts were Nirvana's, Van Halen, like an early AC/DC, an early Van Halen T-shirt.
Which, by the way, those two seemed self-serving to the fact that he mentioned them, because in reality, no one owns a James Taylor t-shirt.
Right. And so either it was a mismatch for the costume department, or they actually did this on purpose, which is, young people today do this, which also bothers me. Now, in his room, he had a Billy Joel poster, but he also had a Nashville pennant, a Tom Petty poster, and a Ramones poster.
Right.
So it's like he was saying things. He had no Simon and Garfunkel. You know, it's like, so I just thought, like, that's just, that sort of detail just drives me nuts. Like, people play willy-nilly with music, and like, for example, Annie was listening to Heart. Do we really think that 18-year-old Annie today, because this is a movie about today.
Yeah, is that what I was going to ask? Is that taking place today?
Yeah, they have cell phones. Do you think she knows who Heart is? Like, now, are 18-year-old girls listening to Heart? You know, maybe some. But on average, just pick an 18-year-old.
Especially if you're in a Christian community, you're probably listening to the different kind of music. It's not that Heart is devil music or anything.
Yeah. The last couple of things I didn't like was the hero bar where they're all having sex. I thought that was really over the top and stupid.
You will not like the comic book.
I mean, well, the comic, it's a different form. You know, Carl Urban's accent, Butcher, his accent was awful. Even I knew that. He's from New Zealand, and he's trying to do a Cockney accent, and it's all the rage all over the internet. Everyone's just like, what accent is he trying? Like, a lot of people think he's actually doing Australian.
Oh, man.
But yeah, it was like, just make him from New Zealand.
Yeah.
Just give him
That's fair.
It's like, just stop it.
If you're going to change all these other things.
Why does he have to be Cockney?
Yeah.
I mean, you made Huey American. You made all the other ones American. Why not?
True.
You know, the other last thing I'll say is that whenever you have male-oriented shows, which The Boys basically is, whenever they want to quickly show that a couple's in love, like Butcher and his wife, they always show them having wild, passionate, multi-position sex. And I challenge you. I challenge you to watch this. Okay. Any movie that's, you know, if it's a movie about like men going to war, but you want to show that they have a soft side, like they have a wife or a girlfriend and they're in love. One of the very first things, or some sort of massive sexual overtone. Now, people have wild, passionate sex. People have sexual overtones. But,
I've heard of this.
But it's such a trope. It's like this. We've got 2 minutes to show that this guy's in love because we're going to show him losing this girl in the future, and we need it to be clear that they were in love. Well, it's a male-oriented show. We have to show them having wild, passionate sex.
Right.
A female-oriented show, they don't do that at all. What they do is they show them maybe playing with the kids together, or walking in the park, or he's down on one knee, or they're playful, they're food fighting at a picnic or something. Like, female-oriented tropes, and it's not like female movies don't have tropes too, because they do. Right. Oh my God, you know, rom-coms versus male-oriented shows, and I'm just like, come on, people, you can be more imaginative.
Interesting.
Than that. All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle, in which we talk about The Boys. Maybe when season 2 comes up, which I can't wait for, we'll talk about that. And I'm sure the writing will go even more divergent from the comic books, and Umberto and I will argue
even more fervently.
No, we won't. We never argue.
We never argue.
Yes, we do. Please take care of yourself, because
you deserve it.